introduce our father a little more formally. His father, Charles Edward Illsley, born in 1842, lived 72 years, died in 1914, and he had 3 children. Our father, Frank Porter Illsley, and 2 girls, Emily and Charlotta.
But they don't mention there our 2 uncles who died in infancy, and so they both died of diphtheria within a week. So they lost the 2 boys. So he was the one boy that was left in the family.
That's news to me. Yeah, I didn't realize that. Now, the mother doted on
And they were in St. Louis, Missouri.
St. Louis, Missouri, and the father, Charles Edward Illsley, was a church architect, if I recall. He designed churches. And he was dominated by his wife, who doted on the daughters, one of whom I think was a musician or something. And
Both of them were musicians.
Yeah.
Both of them were. Yeah.
And Papa's had some resentment toward his sisters, and I think against his mother, and I don't know what his relationship was with his father, but Frank Porter Illsley was a very intelligent, a very bright individual, and very young, he was very interested in engineering and in physics.
And electricity.
And electricity. And when he was very young, he would go around the good neighborhood of St. Louis where they lived, and for $5, which was a lot of money in those days, he would install an electrical front doorbell. People did not have electricity in their homes yet, but he would bring you a dry cell battery, some wires, a button, and a bell in the kitchen. For $5, they'd install it. And he had other kids working for him.
That's
And
when
he
you made $1 a day.
Yeah, he made good money by doing that. Now, there's also the story that one day he was in an Edison Electric wholesale supply, buying some supplies, and a gentleman came in and said he was a bridge contractor, and he had a contract to put a bridge across the Mississippi River, and he needed someone to do the street lights on this bridge. And the Edison Electric man said, well, there's Frank Illsley, he could do it for you. So the contractor hired him, and he did the job, and now you tell the end of the story.
So after he had done this job, the contractor had another person try to contract putting in the lights, so they'd been installed, but the wiring was not done right. And so he needed someone desperately, quickly, to come out there and straighten the job out and get it done right. So my father went out there and did it. When he came back and the lights worked, and he went into the Edison dealership again, the proprietor said, you know, got one word of advice from you. Next time you go in to interview for a job, put on a pair of long pants.
He wasn't even wearing long pants. He wasn't even wearing long pants.
Now, another time he was riding on a streetcar with one of his books, and
Yeah.
You know that story better than I do.
He was reading a book. You know, he was just a kid, and he was reading this
book from the library.
Book from the library, and it was dealing with pretty sophisticated engineering. And the man sitting next to him looked at it and said, "Are you taking that book home for your father?" He said, "No, I'm reading this." And where was that? Edison?
All I know is that somebody noticed the book he was reading.
And then called the father and said, you know, your son is amazing, that he is reading these books and he understands what he's talking about. Now, let me tell you the downside.
That got him into Armor Institute, didn't
Armor,
it?
that could be.
Yeah.
Right. Now, let me tell you one on the negative side. He had a little bit of mischievousness in him, and there was some local police they didn't like or something.
This was
like
up in Evanston.
Oh, was it?
That
Okay.
was in Evanston. Yeah.
And I hope I'm telling the same story. And they knew.
If the police were involved, right.
They knew how to make. Was it TNT?
Nitroglycerin.
Okay, nitroglycerin.
He knew how to make nitroglycerin.
Knew how to make it, and his buddy, his father was a chemist, so they were able to get the chemicals, and they would go down to the river, and they would,
They go out on the bridge.
they go out on the bridge.
pier.
On the
On
pier.
Lake
On the
Michigan.
pier, on the pier in Lake Michigan.
On the
And
4th
they
of July.
mix up the chemicals and then put
But
them in the lake
but wait a minute.
and blow and set off a big explosion, and no one could figure out what these mysterious explosions were. Yes.
Well, when you are making up nitroglycerin, it's a, what,
Temperature
Temperature
sensitive.
sensitive.
yeah, it's, what is it, exothermic process. And you have to keep watching it, and you have to keep stirring it, and if you keep the thermometer in it, and you keep watching the thermometer, and the temperature goes too high, douse it in water fast, because it's going to go off all by itself. And so they were doing that, and this was quite successful, and the poor cop was getting called to chase all over to find out where these explosions were coming from, and they weren't able to figure it out. But one day, he was alone, his friend was off somewhere. Yeah, Papa was alone, and mixing up his batch, and he saw vapor coming off the top of it. And he pulled the thermometer out, and his buddy had broken the bottom off the thermometer.
And hadn't told them.
And told him the thermometer wasn't working. And he shoved with his feet, pushed the whole thing off, and it exploded as it hit the water.
Whoa.
So then he gave up that. He took up other activities.
But our father was very bright, and he was energetic and active and so on and so forth. That was on the plus side. He also had a great deal of pride. He had problems with his sisters and his family. He also had problems in school at one point. As I understand it, the teacher ridiculed him, teased him, by saying something like, "We will now hear a recitation from the brilliant Frank Illsley." And as someone said, the kids kidded him. They didn't bring guns to school in those days, they just kidded him. And so he ran away from school. And his parents didn't know for about 2 weeks where he was. Well, he had run away to his Uncle Will in Evanston,
Chicago.
who was the general contractor who built the Gary Steel mills. He was a partner. Lindquist and Illsley was the
Oh, I
contractor.
never knew that.
Okay.
Lindquist and Illsley was the contracting firm. And they built the Wrigley Towers in Chicago.
We built the Gary Steel Mills,
They built the Gary Steel mills.
Marshall
Illinois
Military
Central,
Bank, yeah,
Illinois Central Railway Station. So
That was his uncle, and he stayed with the uncle. When the family found where he was, they said he wasn't going to go back to that school, he had to go to school. So they suggested that he go to England to study. And he went to England when he was 14 years old on his own money. When he was in England, of course, they all treated him as a Yankee, and the English public schools at that time were very rough, as you know from stories of Winston Churchill and so on and so forth. And he started a lifelong dislike, that's not strong
For the
enough,
Brits.
hatred of the Brits, yeah.
among other things, one of the things that stuck in his memory strong enough to repeat was that in the geography class and the what did they call them? Masters or no? The teachers at the school anyway.
Headmaster, yeah.
Headmaster, yeah. Was describing the 13 colonies and the colony of Connecticut. And he was so bold as to say it's pronounced Connecticut, and he got thrashed.
However, the British kids would bully him for a couple of reasons. First of all, because he was stubborn. Second of all, he could bat a cricket ball a lot better than they could. They did not like that. Thirdly, he was a very good student, and the headmaster had the practice of every month giving a book, an interesting, desirable novel, to the best student. And more months than not, my father won the book. And so for the next week or two, until the other students had been able to borrow the book from him, they were pretty decent to him. Oh, and there's one other thing they didn't like. Come vacation time, he knew electricity. He would go out, and he was accustomed to working. He would go out and see where somebody was building a house in the town, and he would negotiate the contract to put the wiring in their house for them. So while all the other British kids went home and hunted foxes, my father would go around and put wiring in the house, and he'd come back with his hands dirty. The Brits did not like that.
Class system there.
Not in a boarding school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, moving ahead a little bit, he became very interested in automobiles early on, and at some place he started an automobile agency, and I think he sold Stevens Duryea, and he sold Locomobile.
Haynes Apperson was his first agency.
Haynes Apperson. And what year
That's
would
right,
that
that's
have been?
Well, 1901 or 2, something like that.
Okay.
Before he was 21 years old.
Yeah.
He was still a minor.
Yeah, and then he started importing Mercedes-Benz.
First, Rolls-Royce.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, yes, he imported Rolls-Royce. And, okay,
Yeah, the
living with
first
his uncle.
showroom, we sold the first automobile that was sold by an agency in Chicago.
He had the first automobile agency on Michigan Avenue in Chicago
Yeah.
before he was 21 years old. And living with his uncle, who was building things like the Wrigley Towers, okay, he had clients like P.K. Wrigley, John Pullman train cars. These were the caliber of people that he had for customers. Okay, he wanted everything to be the best. He always wanted the best, in anything that he produced. He didn't necessarily want the best for himself, but if he gave anybody anything, it was going to be the best he could put out. For it. In those days, if you bought
Integrity, absolute
Yeah,
integrity.
absolutely. He quit selling Stevens Duryea because the chief engineer, Stevens Duryea, got a new chief engineer who decided that a four-cylinder, Stevens Duryea was one of the first cars to come out with a six-cylinder engine, which has good dynamic balancing on a six-cylinder engine, which you can't get with a four. And a new chief engineer came in and said, we're going to build a four-cylinder engine, it's better. My father could not honestly go to his customers and say, look, a four-cylinder engine is better than a six. And so he gave up Stevens Duryea, went to Rolls-Royce.
In addition to
Oh,
which
that-
he'd had problems with the brakes on the Stevens Duryea.
Yeah.
And so all of the new Stevens Duryea, before he
That was
tried it to
Benz.
a customer, he took the brake line himself.
That may be with Stevens Duryea, but I know that for a fact with Mercedes-Benz. He imported Mercedes-Benz, and he put out his own sales literature in English, obviously, on the Mercedes-Benz. And what he said was, this is a spectacular car. Good German engineering, probably the best car in the world. The only weakness is its brake linings. The best brake linings in the world are made by Bendix.
Oh, really?
Bendix
Yeah.
made
Asbestos.
brake linings. And so when the Mercedes-Benz came into Chicago, my father would strip out the brake linings and replace them with good Bendix, and now this was the best car in the world. and Mercedes-Benz said, wait a minute. If you are going to sell our car, you take it the way it is, and you sell it the way it is, and you don't put out a book saying that sort of stuff, or else. And our father said, cut off a big slice of or else. That was the end of his importing Mercedes-Benz, which is a classic illustration of the character of Frank Porter Illsley.
Okay.
He was stubborn.
I had a different version of that included
Okay.
Rolls-Royce. Rolls-Royce put on, well, first of all, Rolls-Royce would quote the price of a car. And in those days, a person would come to you and say, I want a car, I want a 7-passenger, a 5-passenger, I want a tonneau, whatever it was. And then you would contact the factory and you would get a quotation on putting this car together, and they would start building it, and 6 months later you'd get delivery of it. Okay, when he dealt with Rolls-Royce, they would quote him a price, FOB, Liverpool, England, price in pounds sterling. So he would have to calculate the ocean shipping, the insurance, the conversion rate of pounds to dollars, transportation across the United States to Chicago. That was all right, he could handle that. They also put Lucas magnetos on their cars. And anybody who knows anything about British equipment, Lucas is junk. It was then, it still is today. Bosch German Bosch had come out with a good magneto. And so when he ordered a car, he asked Rolls-Royce to install a Bosch magneto. They said, you take it the way we make it. And so he would import Bosch magnetos and put them on the new Rolls-Royce. But then when he started working with Mercedes, the story I had on the brakes was that he told them that he did this advertising. He told them that he was putting on the asbestos brake linings. And when they got word of that, the next car that came through from them, he went to take the brake linings off. They were asbestos.
Oh.
They would not let something go out that wasn't the best they could make.
Well, then what did happen to his importing of Mercedes-Benz?
He gave up. What happened to his importing, his being a dealership, was that he went to Europe on a business trip. And when he came back, his sales manager or mechanic manager had virtually opened another business and taken his customers away.
Oh.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, that was, it was under the period of that sales manager where once he was looking out into his back room and he saw somebody going, he had lubricating oil in barrels, and he saw somebody wandering around opening the barrels, and he checked out and they were dumping little bags of emery dust into the lubricating oil to make sure that the cars that he put lubricating oil in would
Sabotage.
self-destroy within a matter of a couple of months, because emery dust will just grind out
Yeah.
an
We've
engine.
been talking about how bright
Learning a lot.
our father was, and Mercedes-Benz and Rolls-Royce and so forth. And yet, when we were high school kids, our family was very poor. There is no question. We were very poor, money-wise. How
We
did our...
depended on our school teacher, who was married to a butcher, to leave off a bag of soup bones.
Supposedly
Yeah.
dog bones for the dog, but it went through our soup
There was
first.
no, she knew what we needed,
Yeah.
and she brought us.
We were never on welfare. No way would we be on welfare. But we were very poor. The neighbors used to sell us milk, and we paid for it eventually. We paid for it when you got a job at Camelot Cannon Foundry, and you paid the milk bill. Okay. How did our father transition from being such a young man with so much promise to that? It was his pride that stood in the way. So he lost Rolls-Royce, Mercedes-Benz. I can remember when I was a teenager, I think at that point he invented a couple of important things: the thermostat in the cooling system, the pressure cooling cap on the top of a radiator, and so forth. And he was working on something in Grand Haven, and
He was working on
Bishop.
pressure cooling. He had done the thermostat when he was working for Bishop Babcock, a big parts manufacturer in Detroit. He was doing some consulting work for them. He was only spending maybe 3 or 4 hours a week working for them on an ongoing project. So he rented an office from them in their building where he could be doing his own work. When they needed him, he was available. When they weren't needing him, he could be working on his own thing. They hired an alcoholic draftsman, gave him a skeleton key to my dad's office, and every evening when my father left his office, went home, this draftsman would go in and copy whatever was on my father's drawing board.
and
When
then
my
put
father-
his name on it.
And put his name on it. When my father applied for the patent on the thermostat, they said, the patent office said, sorry, that patent has already been applied for by Bishop Babcock.
Oh.
He knew what had happened, but how could he, one individual, fight a big corporation like that?
But, okay, I have a different story. I don't know
Never
where it
heard that
was.
one either.
No, I hadn't heard that.
Okay.
Another interesting one, he had something that was great, and there was a manufacturing company who were going to manufacture it for him.
It was Harrison Radiator.
Harrison Radiator.
Okay,
Very good.
okay,
Okay,
yeah,
Harrison
yeah.
Radiator. And the vice president of marketing, sales, or maybe chief engineer, some vice president, came to Frank Porter Illsley and said, this is a wonderful idea. And I'm
Pat,
sure we
with
can,
17 claims.
I'm sure we can do something with it, and I can approve the project. And my father said, wonderful. Well, you see, I'm the one who will approve the project. My father said, wonderful. The man said, you don't understand. If I don't approve the project, I'm the one who has to approve the project that's going to go ahead. My father said, wonderful. You don't quite get it. Oh! So, Papa went to the chairman of the board and said, I will not, you have a man who is a crook, your vice president, and unless you fire him, I'll do no business with your company. Well, once again, let's cut off a big slice of that or else. That ended the relationship. Yeah, that ended the relationship. They would not.
Oh, was that on the winter front?
No, that was on the closed radiation system.
Did I have the story
Thermostat?
basically right?
Yeah.
He wanted the man fired and the company wouldn't fire the man, and so that ended the relationship.